Howdy. Recotopia episode 66. I'm Chris Atkinson.
I'm Jeremy Scott.
And hello, everybody over there in the chat who have
Howdy.
come out here on a Tuesday to watch us talk about movies and Mountain Dew and food. How you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing quite well, better than average, I would say. And
nice. I'm doing great. All right. So, do you have any small recommends for us today?
I do. I really do. My wife and I took a little weekend trip, and it was hot as hell and raining the entire time. And so we spent a lot of time in our room, and we watched a couple of movies. The one that I'm going to small recommend right here is The Artifice Girl. I have tweeted about it on both of the Twitter accounts that I maintain, business and corporate, or business and personal. And I'm telling everyone I know about this movie because I think this is a filmmaker to watch. The writer, director, and star is Franklin Wright. No, Rich, R-I-T-C-H. This movie is in theaters and indie places here and there. And you can rent or buy it on Amazon, which is where I found it. And I had already seen tweets from a lot of Hollywood people that I follow about how good this movie is and to check it out. And so, I don't want to say too much about this movie, but I will tell you a little bit. It's told in 3 acts. It would make an amazing play. I'm sure somebody will adapt it one day. In the first act, a man, played by Franklin, is brought in by 2 authorities, a man and a woman, under false pretenses, and pretty quickly realizes that he's a suspect and that they actually work for FBI-ish kind of group. And he is suspected of child pornography dissemination online, because in their investigation, one username keeps coming up, connecting all of the cases, and it's his. And he fairly quickly, this is not going to be a spoiler, but this is about the last thing I'm going to tell you. Fairly quickly, he reveals that it's the opposite. He is fishing for pedophiles and anonymously sending information to these people who have been arresting these people. And there is a young female child at the center of a lot of these catfishes. And the authorities are concerned that he is misusing a child. But it's actually an AI that he's created that is that realistic and able to respond in real time via video. And that's where I'm going to stop. That scene goes on for a little bit, and then you jump ahead about 5 years, and the same 3 characters who are now working together to investigate things. And then the third act jumps ahead, gotta be 30, 40 years.
Damn.
And that's when Lance Henriksen comes in and starts playing the character.
Nice.
This engrossed me. There's only 3 sets. The camera work is minimalist. The performances are good. But what draws you in is the plot. It is perfectly timed for where we're living right now with deep fakes and chat GPT or whatever. It gave me the same kind of exit feeling that Ex Machina and Arrival gave me in terms of the themes. It's asking such important questions about humanity and autonomy and ethical questions with regard to where we are inevitably going to go, which is AI that is indiscernible from reality. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Whatever it costs to rent on Amazon, I'm pretty positive it's worth it if you think you're interested from what I've said so far. It's an hour and a half. It's a thinker. And I just can't say enough good about it. It's really, really good. So there you go.
Well, I'm definitely interested in this. I need to see this. I saw you tweeting about it, and I want to. I need to watch this because this is right up my alley. This is the type of movie that I'd love, probably.
Yeah, The Artifice Girl. Go see it.
Yep. Okay. I went back to 1984, Jeremy. Remember where you were in 1984?
I do.
And I have seen this movie several times, but I ran across it again. I wanted to see it. I see it again. Body Double, Brian De Palma's movie that he made, I think, right after Scarface. He was getting back into his like true De Palma self with this movie. But I will forewarn, this movie's ending has never made sense to me. What even if you throw in some interpretations of it, it still like doesn't entirely make sense. And someone's asking if it's on the Criterion channel. Yes, that's where I ran across it. The So the story is, it stars this guy named Craig Wasson. He's in a lot of stuff, I think, back in this day. I haven't seen him much since this era. I don't really think he looks like Bill Maher to me a lot.
Hmm.
But Craig Wasson is a struggling actor who is at the very beginning of this movie. He is filming some sort of low rent vampire movie that Dennis Franz is the director, plays the director of this director of this. And he we see very early on that he has claustrophobia. He's in the scene that he's in a coffin at the beginning, and he has to act a certain way, and because he's in this closed space, he just freezes. And then they have to like quit filming for the day and everything. He comes home early, and of course he sees his girlfriend having sex with another man, and he has to he wants to, now he needs to leave his house, and he needs to find another place to live. And so he's going on all these auditions, and he tells a friend of his that he's looking for some place to live, and up comes this guy who's at the audition, played by Greg Henry. Greg Henry has been in a ton of stuff. I bet he's got 100 credits on the IMDb. He comes up and starts showing up everywhere Wasson shows up. And eventually he says, "Hey, I've got this place that I've been house sitting for. The guy is always gone, and I was going to house sit for him for X amount of time, but I need to leave. I need to go to some other place. So why don't you help me house sit this place while I'm gone?" So basically just dumping the house sitting duties on him. And so they get to the place that they're house sitting, and they're like, "Here's all the things. This place has got a bar. It's got a revolving bed. It's got, and also it has binoculars where you can look down and see at the same time every night this woman dancing in front of the window and other assorted sexual things while and is like, so yeah, it's like clockwork. Don't worry about it. If you want to go see the show, do see the show. So of course, Greg Henry leaves, and Craig Wasson is at this place, and of course he goes over to the telescope to look at the woman every night. And of course, the first night he sees the show. The next night, though, she's just sleeping in her bed, and she notices somebody walking in and like apparently stealing money, but you find out quickly that it's her boyfriend or husband or something, and he's abusive to her, and he takes the money, hits her, and leaves. And then the next night it gets even weirder. He looks out, and then there's like this guy dressed up as, well, I don't know, he's a satellite, he's like pretending to be a satellite guy. I don't know what it is. He's on top of this satellite, and he's got this grotesque looking face, and he's looking at and this is when the show finally the show is going on again. He's looking at her. So Craig Wasson is looking through his telescope, sees this other guy looking at her, and all of a sudden he's like, "That's not right." That's a kind of an interesting thing that De Palma puts in here, where it's like when you observe someone also peeping on someone, and then you become like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. So he starts to become infatuated with this girl, and he starts following her around, and he starts to notice the dude that he saw on the satellite dish following her around too, and he looks dangerous, and there's no idea what he's planning to do. And ultimately he witnesses this is I'm trying to think if this is a spoiler. I think I'll just stop there. He witnesses something. I'll say he witnesses something through the telescope, and he needs to find out what happened. Ends up, there are other people who end up in this movie include Melanie Griffith, who's playing a porn star in this. But it's a very interesting movie. It's got shades of Rear Window and it's got shades of Vertigo in it, because all the different things that from Rear Window, where somebody's spying on other people in the house and witnessing things and whatever, and like whether there's a moral code that you should follow in this type of thing. And then in the Vertigo, the whole claustrophobia thing, every time this guy gets claustrophobia, if he gets in a tunnel or if he's in the coffin or whatever, like that same sort of almost Vertigo thing happens to him, where like the tunnels seem like way bigger, the holes that he's in seems like way taller and everything. But if you like Brian De Palma movies and his thrillers, this is right up your alley. It is like I said, I have never understood the ending of this movie, never once. I've watched it millions of times, and I couldn't tell you exactly what is really going on there. You could say, well, maybe it's this, or well, maybe it's that. And every time you say maybe it's this, there's so many little other things that contradict the reason that you come up with. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. I think you guys would like it.
Yeah, it's one. I mean, I love De Palma. He's one of my favorite directors, and this is a great one. I didn't see it until much later in life. I saw it, I don't know, 2002 or something for the first time. But yeah, good one. By way of segue, the other movie in my life and I watched this weekend was Air by Ben Affleck, starring Matt Damon.
There you go.
And it's already been small recommended by Chris. But I'm struck by how I noticed in watching that movie how good Ben Affleck's sense of place is, in terms of he almost turns that Nike headquarters into a character itself, in that he makes it feel so much like home to us. It underscores our rooting for them to succeed. So I went back and watched yesterday another Ben Affleck movie. My small recommend is The Town from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
Co-starring Jeremy Renner in a performance that I still say is maybe one of his best, if not
I think
best.
It is.
We have Blake Lively, Rebecca Hall, and John Hamm plays the FBI guy who's after Affleck and his crew. Affleck and crew are bank robbers from Charlestown, the town. He is the son of a famous bank robber who is in jail because he killed a security guard during I think it was an armored car robbery.
Is that Pete Postlethwaite?
No, Pete Postlethwaite is the guy that gives them gigs.
That's right.
Is Chris Cooper.
That's right.
And so there are three heists in this movie that basically are your three acts. The one we open with, where they're robbing a bank, and they end up taking Rebecca Hall, who's the assistant manager of the bank, as a kidnapped prisoner with them, a hostage, which is not part of the plan. And of course, Affleck is not happy about this. And they blindfold her and drop her off at a beach and tell her to wait however many minutes. And so she becomes a key witness for John Hamm and the FBI who are going after them. But they got her driver's license. And so Ben Affleck is like, I'm going to check her out, make sure she's not talking about us, doesn't know anything about us. Of course, he falls in love with her pretty quickly and starts dating her. But he doesn't tell any of the rest of the gang. And there's an awesome scene where Renner just stumbles upon him sitting at a cafe. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing here? And then Rebecca Hall comes out and he's like,
oh my God,
what's going on?
Yeah.
And he kind of toys with Affleck in that moment. The second heist is an armored car heist where they end up getting in a shootout. And there's an incredible car chase through the tight confines of the Boston downtown streets before they finally make it to the bridge before the cops shut it off.
Mhm.
And now John Hamm is pissed. He knows exactly who's doing all these robberies. He just can't prove it yet. And the final heist is, I almost said Wrigley Field. is, is where the Boston Red Sox play. Why can't I think of the name right now? Fenway.
Park.
God damn.
Mhm.
The Cathedral, they call it.
Mhm.
And Ben Affleck doesn't want to do it. Pete Postlethwaite basically says, I'll kill your girlfriend if you don't. So he agrees to do the gig. Again, here is Affleck's sense of place in that Fenway becomes like, we know exactly where we are this entire heist, even when there's a shootout coming from two different directions. And of course, this is a tragedy. People are going to die. I'm not going to tell you who, but it's one of my very favorite movies. It's probably still my favorite Affleck movie, although I think Air is going to climb that chart. And it's currently on HBO Max if you'd like to check out The Town and have never seen it before.
Yeah.
Boston's famous Wrigley Field slabs.
Indeed. The Town is fantastic. I can piggyback on that one. That's a great one. All right. And now I'm going to go to a movie that will not make you feel good whatsoever. This is definitely not a feel good movie. I'm just going to tell you straight up right now. And Jeremy, this does have one of your triggers in it. So,
okay.
You've seen this movie before, I think, but it's Sean Penn's The Pledge, which stars Jack Nicholson. This movie is pretty dark. I think it's got some funny moments. It's got some levity in it.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the movie, you are going to sort of question, what do I feel? I mean, what am I feeling about all of this by the end? And you may not feel too good, no matter what way you decide to land on. But so the story goes that there's a little girl that is raped and murdered, and there's a kid who sees someone running around in the area at the time, played by Benicio del Toro, and he's playing a Native American who has an intellectual disability. So there's a couple of things there that are kind of probably wouldn't do that today, but he plays a character, and he's the guy that ends up being the prime suspect for this murder because he has been in prison for rape before. And so you have this police station. Jack Nicholson is a retiring detective. He's on his last day, of course. And there's a young guy who's about to come in and step up and be the man. That's Aaron Eckhart plays that guy. Aaron Eckhart he's great in this, but his character is annoying, and like he's just he's just a sheer clown in this movie. But Aaron Eckhart is in this, and Sam Shepard plays the police chief. And they bring Benicio del Toro in, and Aaron Eckhart's like, I'm going to get a confession out of this guy in world record time. So he goes in to the room, and if you've ever seen any true crime thing where somebody got a confession out of somebody, this is classic type of stuff where of course the person has an intellectual disability and they don't know what's going on half the time in these interrogations. It's all a trick a lot of times. And it's basically just the Aaron Eckhart standing over him saying, "Hey, you went out there and you raped that girl, right? You killed her because she wanted her to quit screaming. You wanted her to do that." And finally he just admits it, because when someone is pressed up against the wall, basically to try to get out of a situation, they'll just tell you whatever they want to get out of it. And so he confesses, and this is where the trigger moment comes, because he steals the gun of one of the cops, and then he threatens one of the cops, and then they all point guns at him. He ends up taking his own life in there. Now, Jack Nicholson has been watching this interrogation very closely, and he doesn't think Benicio del Toro did it at all. He thinks this confession is bullshit, and of course it is. The way it was gotten is bullshit. So there's a point where he has to go and tell the parents. Patricia Clarkson plays the mom of the murdered girl. He has to go tell the mom about her daughter. It has one of the best scenes of the movie in it when the father says, "I'm going to go down and I'm going to see my little girl," and Jack Nicholson's like, "No, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't want to do that. I know where you're at, but you don't want to do that." And he goes, "Why wouldn't I want to see my little girl?" And he goes, "Because because all the people on the force barely dared to do it. That's how bad this was." And that stops the father in his tracks because he knows how terrible this crime is. Patricia Clarkson basically tells him, basically begs him to pledge or promise that he will find whoever did this. And that sort of sets the whole thing in motion. That Jack Nicholson is going to be obsessed with this. And he goes through and he does some good investigation, but all the evidence that he comes up with, if you were an objective viewer, you would realize, just like all the detectives he's trying to take this to, this is all very circumstantial. And why would we open a case back up for it? There's the murdered girl drew a picture of a guy that was like a giant who was giving her porcupines or whatever, and he's like, "Look at this picture. She drew it before she died. It's a giant giving her porcupines." And Sam Shepard and Aaron Eckhart are like, "The fuck is this? What does this have to do with anything? Like, this isn't real evidence." But nevertheless, we know that he's right because he's Jack Nicholson and he's the star of this movie. But he's triangulated a bunch of other disappearances and killings, and the victims are all similar. So he ends up pretending to continue with his retirement, essentially, and goes off into this area where all the disappearances and killings have been going on. He buys a gas station from Harry Dean Stanton, and he ends up sort of like living in this town, looking for vehicles that match the one that the girl drew in her little drawing, and eventually starts seeing all these people, and like starts to like sort of come up with a mental mental Rolodex of people that are going through, and like, this could be the guy, this could be the guy, this could be the guy. Another person he runs into is Robin Wright, who has a daughter who, of course, has a similar age daughter and similar characteristics to all the murdered girls. She's in an abusive relationship. She comes to him for help. He says, "You can stay here if you want to. I don't want anything. Just help out at the gas station every once in a while and whatever." So he become like a dad to this girl, and they have this relationship that's starting up. They could even get married even. And then as the movie goes on, there is a true prime suspect that shows up in his mind, and what he does to possibly catch that suspect will have you debating whether it's right or wrong. I think it's pretty wrong. But it's kind of like a Gone Baby Gone thing, where at the end where you're like, "Oh yeah, they did the right thing," and then you'll find somebody else who's like, "No, he did the wrong thing."
Yeah.
But anyway, however you slice it, the movie ends not in a conventional manner, and you are going to be sitting there probably as Jack Nicholson is at the end of this movie, doing exactly what he's doing at the end of that movie. So I highly recommend this. This is going to be a big recommend at some point. I actually was going to make this a big recommend. So I'll give it some time, but I'm going to reintroduce this someday. So anyway, there you go.
I saw it as well as the other one I'm about to mention, but I always confuse this with The Crossing Guard.
Same
Jack
Sean
Nicholson,
Penn.
Sean Penn, and Robin Wright. But I don't remember it very well at all. So I will, when you make that big recommend, I will be interested to go back and see it again.
Yeah.
All right.
I
think it's time for the big recommend.
The big recommend.
All right. Now I want to preface a couple things here. I am not going to pronounce character names, specifically the main character, the way the main character pronounces it, because I once saw David Oyelowo interviewed last year, I think, on Kimmel, and he pronounced his name the way it would be pronounced in Africa. It was very interesting. I encourage you to go look at this. Oh, it's Fallon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Fallon starts to say it that way, and David says, "Don't you do it like that. That would be racist." And so I'm going to go with fully Americanized pronunciations here for Ahmed Ibn Fadlan. I'm not going to put in the extra enunciation the way he did, because I don't think I can do it correctly, and I don't want to be racist.
Right.
Also, I said last week, this is a 33 on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it deserves to be up in 70s, and I still think that. But let's talk about The 13th Warrior, a movie that is clearly the competing vision of two different men. And that is its biggest failing, is that it ultimately does not feel like a cohesive vision. What we end up with, in my opinion, is a series of really cool scenes. And it doesn't quite gel the way it should. But let's get into the plot, and along the way, I'll talk about some of my favorite things. We open unnecessarily on a stormy sea with everybody getting rained on, and we see Ahmed Ibn Fadlan. All right. This is immediately flashbacked with narration to his origin in this story. He used to be a poet and a nobleman in the most beautiful city in the world, which they do not name. And he sleeps with another man's wife, which for a man who shows himself to be a very pious religious person throughout the film, kind of a sin. And he is then sent as an emissary to the north, which is basically banishment. And Omar Sharif is in this movie briefly, and he plays the friend of his father, who is also his mentor, kind of his confidant. And along the way, they get attacked by Tartans, which is basically a band of wild people. And they race toward the river. And then the Tartans stop attacking them because around the bend of the river comes a Northman ship. And everybody's afraid of the Northmen, even these bandits. And so they dock on the water, and they're having a big feast in a tent. And so Ibn Fadlan and Melchizedek, that's Omar Sharif, decide to go in there and try to meet the king. And it turns out that the king has just died. And this is actually a meal to mourn him. And now Bolvi, who I'm going to call Beowulf, even IMDb calls him Beowulf, is now the new leader. Actually, he's not until he's challenged by one guy and he slits his stomach open. And that solidifies his status as the leader. And I love how there's a clash of cultures here that's really fun for me for the first half of the film, because he's this rich, prudish, proper, clean nobleman, and these guys, use the same water to wash their face and then spit back in the bowl and hand it to the next guy. They eat like cavemen, and so he's relatively disgusted with them. Anyway, the next morning, a boat arrives with a young kid who they eventually learn is the son of a king in the north. King of the north. And he's arrived asking for help from Beowulf and his men. And they are being relentlessly attacked by the Wendels. This is how this story chooses to interpret Grendel. This is, like I said, it was a Beowulf adjacent story. It's not really an adaptation of the Beowulf story that you know. But these Wendels, they think, are demons, and they're killing everyone. And so Beowulf calls for an oracle, as you do, and the oracle calls for the bones, as you do. And so she throws the bones and starts yelling out, 13 warriors must go if success is to happen. And the 13th man must be no Northman. And everybody turns and looks at Ibn Fadlan, and he takes a few moments to kind of catch up and realize, oh, shit, it's me. And so shortly into the journey, we get probably the standout scene in the entire film, and an all-timer scene for me, over a series of campfires along the journey, as he watches and lip reads and starts piecing together syllables And McTiernan is the foot fucking master of translation transition scenes because he does something similar in Hunt for Red October. And obviously, we have to be able to have them speak the same language because there's no translator anymore. And even having a translator for the whole movie would be annoying. And he, of course, is noble, is very well educated, and he's very intuitive and smart. And somebody makes a passing reference to him after he's finally kind of caught on to their language about something about this one's mother. And he says, my mother was a good woman and a noble birth and something better than your mother, you pig sucking fucking son of a whore or whatever. And the guy gets mad and they all rush him. And where did you learn our language? And it's got a great delivery where Antonio goes, I listened. And it makes them laugh, and they learn a little. They earns a little bit of respect from them in that moment, and it's one of my very favorite scenes in the whole movie. Then we go on to the next morning, and they're constantly making fun of his horse because he's got this white Arabian horse, and it's half the size of the Viking horses these Northmen are on, and they keep calling it a dog. And so he goes off and does this, I don't know, steeplechase thing around the water and jumps over the stuff and ends by literally jumping over one of the giant Northmen's horses. And again, while I think he earns some respect with this, Beowulf cracks, the dog can jump. So they're not giving this guy an easy time. And he's probably just as off-putting to them as they are to him. So then they get to the village. They're riding in, and they mention that there's almost no men between 15 and 50. It's all women and children. So at least the attacks are real and the deaths are actually happening. And they go in to see the king, and we don't hear what he says, but he essentially tells Beowulf this fantastic story about the Wendels, which the Northmen then talk about being either a legend or something that nobody has claimed to see in hundreds of years. And then there's a child running down the mountainside, and they race, and he's bloody and injured. And the queen of this village knows who this child is, and she leads the Northmen to his home. And
by the way, Diane Venora making a second appearance on Recotopia.
And so I think it's a pretty cool scene where they very stealthily sneak up on this hut, and some men stay behind with arrows, and some men all crashing together. And of course, what they find is horrific. The bodies have been slaughtered. There's blood everywhere. And they find a totem that they know to be the Wendels. It's a totem of their mother, their queen mother, who they sort of worship. And so they're all like, shit, that's real. They're actually here. They're actually back. And then we get the scene that probably closest resembles the original Beowulf poem, where they're all sleeping in a circle in the king's great hall, expecting an attack. And I love the moment when Ibn Fadlan wakes up in a start and realizes slowly that every other Northman is pretending to sleep and has his eyes and ears wide open. And then they are attacked by what look to be bear-type walking on hind leg creatures. We're going to find out, you probably already know, they're just men. In the book, this is based on they're descended from Neanderthals, I believe. So they are sort of wild men, if you will. And they lose a Northman in that battle, has his head removed, and the bad guys take it. Every one of the Northmen kills at least one or two of these Wendels. Even Ibn Fadlan stabs one in the stomach. But there are no bodies left behind. They take their own dead with them when they leave, which is adding to their mystique and the case for them being, I don't know, demons. At the cabin where the bodies were slaughtered, they noticed that the bodies had been gnawed because they call these people eaters of the dead, which is the original name of the film and the name of the book that it's based on. And the next day, they decide to build fences. Pretty good idea. Maybe should have done that the first night. And we see how useless Ibn Fadlan is with the sword, because there's a scene earlier where they give him a giant ass sword. And he's like, I cannot lift this. And he goes, grow stronger. So he can't swing this sword fast enough to chop the stick into a spike. So he goes to the metalworking guy and basically asks for a custom Arabian style sword. And they make fun of him to turn his sword into a knife. But then he shows with his moves because he's apparently an expert swordsman with this thing. And now he can make the spiky things too. So one of the subplots of this movie that I don't need, and I think clutters it up, is this water girl nurse woman that
same.
Antonio keeps interacting with and then eventually sleeping with and then exchanging glances with. I don't need any of that. This character's journey to me doesn't need a woman at all or a love interest of any kind. He's going from A to B. We don't need any detours, but she tells him, hey, the prince of this village is conspiring against you and has the king's ear. And this is one of the weirdest, unexplained, awesome scenes I've ever seen, because Beowulf decides we got to teach that prick a lesson. And the way we're going to do it is to kill one of his men in trial by combat after an argument. And so the right-hand man, I never remember his name. He's the funniest character in the movie, though. Always has a smile on his face. He starts a fight with this guy who's twice as tall as him. And they go to trial by combat, and the guy's kicking his ass because he's Rocky Balboaing the guy, and he's waiting for one final blow where he stands up and gets out of the way and turns. It's almost mirrored in that Game of Thrones famous duel too, with Oberyn. Anyway, so he easily beats him, and Antonio's like, what, you were toying with him? You could have beaten him all along. And he was like, that's not the point. Now the prince has to think about things he didn't expect. And we never see the prince again. Like that plot thread is completely dropped. And I suppose the argument is they shut him down completely with his plots by this killing. But they even say, man, we could have used that guy's sword in battle tomorrow. That was a costly lesson that we had to teach.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't make discount Ben Foster. That's who that guy is. I mean, he's, Norwegian Ben Foster.
Right.
That's a good peg there, Nick. Anyway, I don't know if that guy deserved to die, but I really like that scene. The second night they're there, we finally see the fireworm, the glowworm. And again, there's a child running down the hill.
Recurring, a lot of this.
Recurring thing in this movie. And she's stuck outside the gate. And so Ibn Fadlan goes out and rescues her. And the glowworm, from the outset, is pretty obviously a bunch of men with torches. But they continue to believe it's some kind of dragon until Ibn Fadlan comes back with the girl and says that it's just cavalry with torches. They still don't realize they're men. They still think there's some kind of demon creature bear things that are just riding the horses. And then there's an awesome battle. This movie, by the way, is not super interested in the battles. And I think that's intentional. When we get to the battles, we get a lot of artistic choices with the audio, and we get a lot of flash pan cutting. It's not a duel kind of movie. But I think that's intentional, because I think it's not about the battles. It's about Ibn Fadlan's journey. And he kills one and realizes it's a man, and he goes on a frenzy. He's like, man, I could kill these motherfuckers. And he goes up to Discount Ben Foster, and he's like seething. And the guy says, don't worry, little brother, there are more. And again, they lose some villagers and warriors, and they kill some Wendels. And at this point, Beowulf is like, we got to get proactive with these guys. We got to take the fight to them. If they're, they have to sleep sometime. And if you have to sleep, you have a lair, I think he says. And so we once again go to an oracle, because they're handy in this universe. And she says, basically, here's where they are. And you have to kill the queen. And then you have to kill their leader, the leader of the warriors. If you do that, you will win. And they're like, okay, great. That's easier said than done. And then the movie kind of turns into a Goonies romancing the stone swashbuckling thing as they sneak into this cave and stealth past the sleeping Wendels. And then they are discovered just outside the queen's chamber. And Ben Foster says, Beowulf, you go kill the queen. Go on. It's all for naught. If we don't kill the queen, we'll stay back and hold these men off. So Beowulf sneaks in, and the queen's no match for him, but she does dip her long fingernail claw in blood poison and scratch Beowulf before he beheads her. And so by the time he comes out, he's already stumbling and slouching. And they're now outmanned. They're about to be overrun. And they hear the sound of the surf and realize, well, this little passage here does lead to the ocean. The question is, will we die trying to swim it? Is it too long for us to swim? Is the passage wide enough for us to even fit? And we're warriors, but instead of fighting, let's swim. And this is something I've started to notice over the last 3 or 4 years in doing what we do on videos and just watching movies. The number of times people in movies dive into water in a cave on a hope without any guarantee that you're not going to die. Thankfully, they don't die. They just swim a little bit and they hold their breath and they come up in the ocean. So they go back to the village, and that's when Ibn Fadlan is informed, well, they're going to attack again tonight because we didn't kill the lead warrior yet, and we killed their queen mama, and they're going to be pissed. And so Beowulf is saying to him, I want you to write my story after I'm dead. And this is suggesting that Ibn Fadlan is the author of the Beowulf poem, because that poem in real life, the author is unknown. And I think that's kind of an interesting little twist. Also, I meant to tell you, Ibn Fadlan is a real person who really did go to the north, but he went to convert people to Islam, and that is where the connections and similarities end. But I did think that was interesting that they chose to write this about an actual real person. So anyway, the Northmen go out to meet the oncoming army. They know they really just need to kill the leader. And then they see their hero, their boss, Beowulf, stumbling down in the mud to face battle with them. And again, movie's not terribly interested in the details of the battle, but I do love that just before this battle, they start their Northmen chant again. Lo, do I see my ancestors? And this time, Ibn Fadlan joins them. And this is, I realize the movie isn't perfect, but this is the completion of his journey. He is now a warrior. He was a poet. Now he's a warrior. And I get chills when he starts chanting that with them. There's a lot of whip pan sword play, but we do get to see Beowulf pretty easily dispatch the leader of the Wendel army. And as foretold by the oracle, a horn sounds and the Wendel retreat. I don't know how we assume they're never going to be a problem again, because they still live pretty close and tend to eat flesh. But without their two leaders, they are disbanded. They take off, and Beowulf, in what I think is a pretty badass moment, sits down on the front fence, slams his sword in the ground, and dies. And the final thing we see is Ibn Fadlan on a boat, returning to his homeland, thankful for his growth, and writing the story of Beowulf and the Northmen. So there you go. That is my recap with some of my internal feelings about this movie. Chris, how did you feel about it walking through it this time?
All right. I don't think I saw this movie ever before. This came out during the time that we were both at Hollywood 27. I believe it came out in 99, and it came out in that I think it came out around, I didn't look at the release date, but didn't it come out like in August or September or something like that? Feels like it came along a lot of similar kind of movies or whatever going on at this time.
Yeah,
but,
August 27th. Good call.
Yeah. I remember seeing the scene that you're talking about where he's reading the lips and getting the syllables and all that, and then he finally learns the language and all that. I remember that scene. So this is the first time I've watched this movie.
Okay.
So I like this movie. I just think that this feels like it was clearly edited and cut to death. And that's where you're talking about these badass scenes that then end up not doing anything overall. Because I was sitting there, I knew immediately what you were talking about when you were about to say this leads to this scene where it's awesome, but it doesn't mean anything. And I was like, you gotta be talking about this scene where they fight dude, and it's like, and and there's like some idea of where he's like that after it's done, he's like, yeah, I had to make him see, had to fight him this way because so that he would see something that he's not seeing or something like that. And I don't know. I couldn't. I had a hard time on that one, but I like the action in this. John McTiernan has always been very good at action, whether it's
Mhm.
Die Hard or Predator, or Hunt for October, um, and so I feel like the action is pretty good in this. I do like. I think the Crichton influence in this. If you've ever read Crichton, and I had Eaters of the Dead. I never read that book, but I read a whole bunch of other Crichton, like Congo,
Mm.
Jurassic Park, all
Yep.
these different
Me
ones.
too.
And one thing that about this that I think is very Michael Crichton is the idea of things that we create in our minds. It was like the things that we don't understand, we create a fantasy around them that make them even scarier than they really are. And in this
Mm.
case, you have these people who are putting on bear costumes and have bear claws and all this other stuff, and people who see them think they're actual like bears or demons or whatever you want to call it. And they invent an entire narrative that's not true around that. And you have to have somebody like, Antonio Banderas in here who uh looks at things in more empirical fashion and tells, says, hey, you know what, this is not some supernatural thing. And understanding that makes battle obviously a lot easier. You're not sitting there like, trying to figure out some weird weak point or something. It's just a man, kill him just like men. And I love how he solves problems in this. Obviously, he's got a problem being an actual warrior and all this, and he gets a lot of shit for that. But if not for him, obviously they don't find this cave, and he does. I love how he sits there and he thinks about it. They think they're bears, so they probably live in caves. They
Yeah.
probably do that's a really cool idea. I love that type of thing. I just wish that maybe this an early candidate for a super secret double feature on this movie was Kingdom of Heaven, just mainly because Kingdom of Heaven felt like a movie when you saw it in theaters. It felt like it was too edited, and then when you see the director's cut of it, you realize, wow, this is a really, really great movie they left on the cutting room floor. And this one feels like the same to me. So there's a lot of things in here that I wish could have been fleshed out a lot more.
Yeah.
But in the end, I found myself riveted watching this movie. So I have yet to be able to say, except for the movies that we saw in theaters, like
Right.
Ambulance,
Yeah.
where I could say this wasn't very good or
Right.
whatever. It's just, I think this is good. It's just cut too much to death. It has to be.
It has, if you look into the trivia on IMDb and some other places, it has some of the most notoriously low screening scores of the initial McTiernan cut. What's crazy to me, though, is that as much as I love Crichton, I mean, he created a lot of stuff that I like. ER was one of his creations, and I watched 7 or 8 seasons of that show. I've read most of his books. But if you have really bad test screenings of a John McTiernan film, it's 1999. Do you go back to John McTiernan, director of Die Hard with a Vengeance, Hunt for Red October, Predator, and say, try again? Or do you turn to the guy whose best movies directed were in the 70s, The Great Train Robbery and Westworld? I don't think Crichton has a directorial history, and they gave him like $40 million to go do reshoots. Really? And that's why this movie feels like this, is that it really is two people's visions trying to be stitched together. And yeah, I think the best way to describe it is it's a collection of really cool scenes that never really get cohesive together.
Yeah.
But I do love the McTiernan-ness of it. Like there's a shot when they first start the journey where we're right behind them. and they're on a snowy mountain, and we see in the distance a snowy mountain, and they go down off camera out of view, and we zoom in on the tiny mountain behind, and there they are, tiny as ants going in the background. And it's just a really cool transition shot that your average day director, probably wouldn't put in their movie. I also really like Jerry Goldsmith's score, which is actually one of Crichton's best contributions, because there was an entirely different score, and Crichton threw it all out and hired Jerry Goldsmith. And I think it's a very memorable, hummable score that goes with this film and its big moments. All right, we talked a lot today. We got to get to a couple of things here. The super secret double feature, which I think in the chat has devolved into insanity, because they're not being serious in any way anymore.
A lot of number movies being pitched as the super secret double feature.
Edge of 17.
Obviously what was that?
Edge of 17, 16 blocks, 21 grams.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so I ran the gamut on this one. The first one that I thought of was Game of Thrones, just because of all the people from the north. There's this creature, this mystical army coming from some place that we need to kill, and we need to get everybody on board and all of that. Game of Thrones came up. The two immediate Northman type movies that came to mind were The Northman and Valhalla Rising, the Nicholas Winding Refn movie that came out, or Nicholas Winding Refn, that has Mads Mikkelsen in it. So those all swirled around my head, and I ended up on two choices, and I've gone back and forth on this one. And I want to give you my ultimate choice here. The first one that had strong consideration to be the double feature movie was the Last Samurai. The idea of The Last Samurai is that Tom Cruise is, he's not a part of this culture that he's being brought into, but he's already a badass person, and he's being sent in to train an army. And it's the battle of old versus the battle of new and all that. And it fits in that manner that Cruise is a fish out of water type of thing. And there's a battle to be had and whatever. So I think that would be a good one, but I'm going to give you a kind of an offbeat one. And we've already said the name of this movie several times already. The Hunt for Red October is what ended up for the super secret double feature on this. Not only because McTiernan directed it, but it has some similar moments in it. First off, you got to start with Alec Baldwin, who is the Antonio Banderas of that movie. Alec Baldwin is a guy who is not really a Navy man, or at least not seen as a Navy man. The Jack Ryan is not. He gets some respect somewhere in the middle of the movie where Fred Dalton Thomas is like, that kid did traction, blah, 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 for 2 years and blah, blah. But he's the brains. Everybody else is the brawn, and there's some brains. Scott Glenn and others have some brains, but it's really Alec Baldwin who's saying, this is what's happening, this is what we need to think about, and whatever. And then the mystical creature of this movie is the silent submarine that Captain Ramius, aka Sean Connery, is piloting. And you think I'm piloting. I know I just everybody got everybody in the fucking sailing world just fucking wanted to throw their TVs through the screen when I said that. That he's captaining that's the same. It felt like the same kind of thing to me. Yes, the idea is, first off, that the silent submarine even exists, and that he would even possibly use it to attack the United States. And it takes Jack Ryan to come in and say, and think about this logically, and like, I know this man and I know what he's up to, and whatever. So it ended up, that was where I went. I thought, yes, there is a McTiernan connection here that I don't know if we've done yet. I don't know if we've done a director to director thing like that before, but it felt right to me because there's so many elements in it if you look at it a certain way. So that's where I went on that.
I can dig it. It by the end, he earns the respect of the brawn because he shows some brawn himself and going after the saboteur. And so yeah, I love it. You know, I'm a McTiernan hound, so I'll take it.
Yeah.
But I do want to let you know The Last Samurai is on my mega long list of big recommends. I love that movie. So
Another Edward Zwick.
Another Ed Zwick, who really almost never misses, even though a lot of his movies kind of fall below the radar of the blockbuster mainstream audiences.
Well, I'm kind of glad that it didn't say it if that's the case, because that way we can have you know a completely quote unquote clean big recommend that has not been mentioned before. So
right. Excellent.
So yeah, that's where you go. It would have been a perfectly fine double feature. I think it works well with it, but I wanted to go a little bit offbeat on this one. So
all right, what about
next week's homework? We're going to continue the comedies through the decades, and once again was trying to find like Abbott and Costello and stuff like that, but those Abbott and Costello movies are just, they have to pay for them. And even this movie, you have to have HBO Max to see it for free. But since it's on at least one, and you can rent it in other places, I decided to go with this one. And this one is a pretty obvious choice. We're in the 1950s. It's Some Like It Hot. We're getting into Billy Wilder territory here, and this is a classic through and through. It is a very funny movie and might be timely in this day and age to talk about Some Like It Hot. Like, you think that stuff like this didn't fly in the 50s. This was a huge hit back in the 50s. So there you go. That's the movie for next week.
This is on my list of shame. I've never seen it. So one of the reasons I like doing this show is it's helping me slowly get through that list. And I'm very much looking forward to this because yes, it does have a stellar reputation. I think that's going to do it. We don't really have much time left today, but chat, as always, you guys are awesome. Even when you're trolling us with numbered titles of movies. Chris, you want to take us out?
Yep. All right. Well, that's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you guys once again for listening to us and everything. So we haven't gotten to questions the past couple of weeks, but we will get to them again. I promise. When we're not so verbose and over talkative like we were today. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.